Well, my knowledge of the civil rights movement probably goes back to when I lived in New York City. I grew up there in Harlem, and what I do remember was a couple of different things. The first time I remember was when Kennedy got shot. I think I was in fourth or fifth grade, and I remember it was a public school, PS 100. The teachers stopped everything on the announcement on the speaker was the president's been shot, and we bowed our heads in prayer. Going forward to the mid '60s, late '60s, and '68 when Martin Luther was shot and killed. I remember my father telling us, "Stay in the house, don't go outside." My first job I had was downstairs in that same building. There was a meat market. When they had the riots after Martin got shot, um, that entire neighborhood was torn apart. The owner of the business was a nice man. He was white. Most businesses that had meat markets or grocery stores in that at that time in that neighborhood were owned by white businessmen, and this store was just completely torn apart. The neighborhood was torn apart. They were stealing TVs. They were breaking windows. We basically stayed in the house from the time that we heard about it. I mean, riots, it went on for a couple of days, and you just had to stay in the house so that you wouldn't get hurt by either somebody that was looting or the police. I had one basketball scholarship that was out of state, and because I lived in Harlem, and I had uh, scholarships to inner city schools or Manhattan College and things like that. I went to college out of state to Neosho, Missouri. So a kid who lived in Harlem all his life and then moved to basically a small country town, you could tell there was a difference. I mean, people just were just not the same. It was just more white people than there were blacks, and most of the blacks were just the basketball players. There wasn't anybody to date, back then. If they saw a black guy, dating a white girl, it was just kind of you were looked at differently. And so a lot of basketball players back then, dated white young ladies. So I was riding my bike with my wife down Route 4, actually. Some guys came by in a truck, and I guess it was I don't know what they threw at me, but it was a bag of screws or something hit me in the face, and that was probably the first and the worst time I'd actually experienced prejudice that way, where actually there was some physical violence. Marrying my wife here in Cincinnati at Track and Assembly um, was well received. A lot of people that were basically um, in favor of it. Mr. Dillard was my best man. My assistant coach was one of my groomsmen. Two of my basketball players who were white was my groomsmen, along with my brother. And then the gentleman that married us was my wife's older brother, Larry, and he was a pastor. So we had a very integrated wedding when we got married. The first time I'd ever experienced kindness from a white person was actually when I got saved. A guy named Gary Scott, who was a basketball player from Louisville, Kentucky, and Coach Dillard. And those were the two guys that probably influenced me the most as far as coming to the Lord. But Gary was just a white basketball player from Louisville, Kentucky, who read his Bible all the time. In our home with our kids, I, you know, we tried to, because they had a white mom and a black dad. We made sure that they got to see both sides of each family. And as a matter of fact, when Nicole was very young, we went to New York. We had Thanksgiving dinner at one of my aunt's home in Connecticut. So we walk into my aunt's house. Now, when most of the time Nicole saw mom, who was white, we came in the door and sat down, and Judy was holding Nicole, and all these black faces are around her, and they're saying how cute Nicole was, and I just remember her starting to scream because she had seen all these black faces around her, and it was just kind of cute. But she got used to it. We didn't talk about prejudice. We just tried to talk more about treating people the right way, and how God would want you to be treated. We spent a lot of time teaching them, you treat someone like how you want to be treated, and it wasn't necessarily about color. Color never really came up, or was race never really became an issue. So we always told them they had the best of both worlds. They had the best of the white side of it, and they had the best of the black side of it. And so, to this day, I'm proud of the way my kids have turned out. Prejudice is dislike. In other words, don't look at color. I'd say, first of all, find out what that person's background is like, what their history is like. But I would also say learn the history of why blacks are the way they are, why culture is the way they are. Everyone's different because of their environment. Be respectful of that person's background, of that person's space. Be careful of what comes out of your mouth as far as your words. Again, it goes back to treating someone the way you want to be treated. But be sensitive to what comes out of your mouth. The tongue is the worst thing that you can have if it's used the wrong way, or it could be the best thing. Find out what really happened in history, black history. Just learn more about it. I was brought up to respect elders. I was brought up to respect those who are in authority. Those things mean a lot. And I'd say if you start with that, and if you treat someone the way that you would want to be treated, you don't have to worry about prejudice. Prejudice is ignorance. If you're going to dislike someone, it could be if you're going to dislike something or someone, dislike them because they might have done something to harm you. Don't dislike them because of what you've heard or because of what you see. Again, treat people like how you want to be treated, and you don't have to worry about prejudice.